Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again, and thank you as always for taking the time to join me today. I really appreciate it. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Associate Director of Sales for Caesars Entertainment, Jennifer Kishpaugh, who is here to discuss her career journey. Specifically, we'll spend some time talking about the Caesars portion of the career journey and how that evolved up to and including her new role as a mum. So Jennifer started her hospitality career at the iconic Nikki Beach in South Beach, Miami over 20 years ago, and then life had other plans and she ended up in Buffalo, New York 5 years later. She spent 5 years working with a local hotel market when the opportunity to work for Caesars Entertainment presented itself. And Jennifer says that joining the team in 2013 was the best decision she ever made. Caesars has allowed for so much growth personally and professionally for Jennifer, and it was so impactful that she even met her significant other at a work meeting and she coerced him. See, when I first read that part, I thought, wait a minute, what's coming next? She coerced him from the sunny desert to the equally gorgeous Buffalo, where they reside with their son Wilder, their two Boston Terriers, and coming in January, they will complete their family with the addition of their second son. Now, here's a little bit of a personal story in my experience with Jennifer. Jennifer and I met probably about 9 or so years ago, I think it was, as I was planning an event, a NARSA, North American Rangers Supporters Association event in Las Vegas for my other passion, which of course is Rangers Football Club. And we've successfully worked on two, and maybe counting, successful such events thus far. And I can tell you from personal experience that her style and dynamism and genuine care and understanding of and for customer needs and wants and overall satisfaction is literally unmatched with anyone that I have met in her position, and I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed getting to know her a bit better, getting to work with her, and as I say, getting the events completely off the ground, up and running and successfully executed. To Jennifer, thank you very much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Me too. So shared a wee bit of your journey in terms of kind of what your career looked like, but I'm looking specifically at Caesars Entertainment, obviously a global brand, what is it, 25, 26 properties worldwide, some online,
Yes.
most physical properties and such. So you mentioned it's the best decision, and it didn't specifically say the best career decision. It was the best decision, which sounds like a life decision. So can you tell us a bit about your journey? The entrance to your journey at Caesars Entertainment, how you thought it was going to manifest itself, how it's manifested itself, and the impact and growth that you've enjoyed during your time there.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first got a LinkedIn message asking me to interview for a position, I honestly thought it was a scam because
Oh
I
wow.
said, what do they want a girl living in Buffalo, New York to work for this huge, multinational corporation? But I said, I at least should look into this and see what's going on. It ended up not being a scam. And I had this amazing opportunity to fly out to Las Vegas and meet with the team. And I remember leaving and thinking, like, how would they pick me to do this job of all the people that would be interested in this? And I was at the time, it was right when I had moved back to Buffalo. I was working at a very small property. And I think I almost felt like my wings had been clipped a little bit in that I would never have that big South Beach event experience again,
Yeah.
just because this is the time, thinking back 15 years ago, where you tended to need to be on property and live where you worked.
Mhm.
And so Caesars presented this incredible opportunity to work from home, which was pretty rare back then. And I think most of us live in that world now, and we see how
Yeah.
incredible it is and how much freedom it grants. But at the time, you tell people that you'd kill for that. And so having that opportunity just in and of itself was amazing. But when I started with them, I started doing just kind of a more local centric sales, which was the upstate New York region and Pittsburgh and kind of areas that were around where I was. Shortly thereafter, the person that handled international, all of our international business, left the company. And I somehow talked them into let again the girl in Buffalo, not the girl in New York City or LA or anywhere, but the girl in Buffalo doing this job. And it was interesting because growing up, I was super passionate about, and I don't want to say hospitality because I probably didn't even know that word, but hotels. I loved hotels. I loved traveling. I would ask to stay in hotels as my birthday present. Not, I didn't want a material item. I wanted to go stay at like the local Holiday Inn because I just was enamored with what I now know to be hospitality.
Yeah.
And so I really was passionate about it. But when I went to college in the 90s, there were maybe 3 or 4 hospitality programs. It wasn't what it is today, maybe Cornell and Johnson and Wales, but it wasn't prevalent. So I didn't see that as an opportunity for me. And so I went into what was my next passion, which was politics and political science and pre law and international business. And I kind of wanted to parlay something, a legal career touching into international business. That was kind of the direction I was going in. And then when I graduated from college, I ended up finding this amazing job at a hotel. And so I kind of diverted and I thought I was going then down the hospitality path. But when that opportunity at Caesars came about for that international role, I remember when it clicked in my head that I was actually doing the 2 things I'd always wanted to do, which was hospitality with the international side of it. And so I just remember that like realization, like, oh my God, you did it, like, wow, that's incredible. I've been in that role for a long time and it allows me to travel around the world, meet with customers all over the world. It's very, I learn something new every day. It's so interesting because the way that we do business in the US is different than the way it's done in Canada. And
Yeah.
it's very different from the way it's done throughout Europe. And so I've learned a lot. I continue to learn. I continue to try to come up with ways that we can address those differences so that there's not a barrier to entry to come and do large conventions and conferences in the US, especially in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So I never stop learning. And then the other piece of my career journey has been the opportunity to be involved in the leadership at Caesars and be an associate director of sales. I would say if hospitality and international business were my professional passion, a personal passion of mine has always been to be a mentor and to help people with their personal growth because people have really helped me with mine.
Yeah.
And so I kind of feel like I have it all in my career because I really get to do all the things that are important to me.
Yeah.
And that's because of the culture at Caesar. So I feel really
Yeah.
lucky.
That's incredible. It's amazing. I was actually so surprised when you said it all generated from a message on LinkedIn. So was it like literally a cold call in message? Is that how it
It
started?
was, interestingly enough, it was a LinkedIn message who from our CSO, which I knew that our CSO was not sending LinkedIn, no CSO is
Yeah.
LinkedIn messaging people.
Yeah.
It turned out that our recruiting company at the time would use his profile to gauge interest from people. But
Right.
to be completely honest with you, I thought it was maybe a timeshare because I
Right.
just didn't make sense. Like, actually, at the time, I was working at a small hotel in Canada with like 105 guest rooms. And, they're like, okay, do you want to come work in Vegas? And I didn't believe it, but I called them back because we had a couple mutual connections.
Mhm.
And to make it a little bit more like kind of funny, they said, okay, we want to fly you out to Vegas next week. And I was like, what? I'm like, this just doesn't seem real because I'd
Yeah.
only connected with a recruiter.
Yeah.
She wasn't with Caesar, she was a third party.
Yeah.
But funny enough, I needed X amount of miles to hit my like threshold with the airline in order to keep my status.
Yeah.
And because they wanted to fly me out within a week, the ticket was going to be exorbitantly expensive. So I literally said, fine, because then I'm gonna hit my diamond status with my airline. And I just figured, what can it hurt? I'll go out to Vegas, I'll find out that they want me to sell timeshares and I'll fly home.
Yeah.
Turns out that wasn't the case, but I'm sure I still have that message somewhere. But we have definitely progressed since then in terms of how we hire and recruit people. But
Yeah.
it definitely came across as some weird spammy message, but it obviously
That's
worked out.
fab. That's a great story. I'm sure that's something that LinkedIn would probably like to hear about too, just in terms of the reach, in terms of the impact that has.
Yeah.
So, considering then your long-standing experience in sales and business development, and internationally too, I was really fascinated about the different types and styles of business that you encounter between the various countries
Mhm.
that you're working in. What would you say has been the biggest, evolving? Every industry is evolving, of course, some at a different pace and maybe in a different direction than others. But what would you say has been like the main evolving parts of your role as you've gone through? And I do want to talk about the pandemic at some point, so maybe this is an opportune time because
Yeah.
obviously that would have an impact to it. But just in terms of the industry today versus the industry when you first joined, what would be the biggest parts of change that you've seen?
Yeah, so to your point, I think there is kind of a two part here, which is just the industry changing, and then obviously the industry changing so much under COVID. But I thought a lot about this in preparation for this, and I thought at first I thought of three things, and I thought of five, and I mean, it was kind of spiraling because I mean I think back to when I started in this industry 20 plus years ago and how much has changed. And I'm sure there's people that would love to talk to you about how much the technology has changed in AI, but
Yeah.
that's not me. That's not what I focus on. But I thought, I think I tend to think a lot more about consumer behavior. And so what really stuck out to me is a few things. A big thing we talk about now is leisure, which has been bit wow, I can't even talk, which is blending business and leisure into your
Right.
travel. And it's huge now. And
Right.
it has a big impact on the destinations that people choose.
Yeah.
People, meeting planners used to a lot of times choose to pick some place that was, that the quick in and out, we'll do it at an airport hotel. People
Yeah.
don't want that. They want to stay afterwards.
Yeah.
I would say on the registrations I receive for events now, half of them have a spousal program. You never used to see that. Nobody's spouse wanted to come to their event.
Right.
And now they do, whether it's to enjoy the city while their spouse is in the program, or they come in the last day and then they and their partner, friend, spouse, family member enjoy the area. So I think that's just been really impactful. You just don't see that whole like we just need to have a meeting and then everyone's going to leave. I mean, we're adding on pre and post stays all the time. I mean, I had a group just yesterday that said 20% of their group will stay pre and or post. And so I think that's really changed things. I think a big thing, this is kind of a two-parter with the pandemic, has been how we interact with our customers. For
Mm.
so many years, we did sales calls. We went and we took people and either we took them out to lunch or we met them in their office. Most people aren't in an office anymore. They're at their home. So it might not make sense to meet them for lunch. And you have to come up with these really bespoke experiences to connect with your clients now, which has, I think, initially challenged us because we're like, what do you mean you don't want to come out to a fancy dinner? And it's like, they've been to a million fancy dinners. They'd rather have dinner with their 3-year-old, quite
Yeah.
frankly, because I think the pandemic realigned family values for us and the importance of spending time with our families. And so we have to be really creative now. And just specifically my team at Caesars, we do a fall fest. We just had it 2 weeks ago where we allow our customers to bring their kids, bring their spouses, bring their family members. We host family photo shoots so you can get Christmas cards done. And then we just do a ton of activities for kids. And I think there's a type of bonding that occurs when you get to know someone's family, and we bring our families too,
Yeah.
which I think is so, so awesome. And so when my son's running around playing with my client's son, it's something you don't get over a nice dinner and a nice,
Yeah.
glass of Sauvignon Blanc or whatever it may be. And so I mean, we still have the glass of Sauvignon Blanc. We're just at a cool winery, in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And it's pretty special. And so customers need that. They will not come to just a dinner anymore. They want something different and experiential. And so that kind of, I've seen that desire for bespoke to kind of infiltrate all aspects of hospitality.
Yeah.
People don't just always want a big box hotel anymore. That doesn't affect us as much in Las Vegas, but I see when I travel to smaller markets, more niche markets, people do not want to stay in a large corporate hotel. They want to stay in a boutique hotel.
Yeah.
They want to know about where their food comes from. They want to know about cultural experiences that they can have at that hotel. I was just in Lisbon and I stayed in a monastery that was built 1,000 years ago, and I wouldn't have it any other way. That's 10 times cooler to me than staying in, your big box hotel. And people want that. They want the story. They want the picture that they can post, that they can tell people about. And I think that has changed so much from what we used to look for. And people just want niche experiences. They don't want to do what their friend did. They want to, I don't want to say one up them, but they want to do the cool new thing that maybe someone else hasn't done, or the destination. So I think we have to really be creative now in how we sell to people, how we market to people, And then also as a consumer, I see how it's changed my patterns of behavior and what I'm interested in, what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to think of some of the other changes. I would say Airbnb coming online was huge.
Of course, yes.
Opportunity to, I mean, again, not huge in Las Vegas where I work, but in those smaller markets, it's been really impactful. And then I think the other thing that I kind of touched on is this younger generation, they're our biggest cohort of buyers now,
Yeah.
and they care about what your DEI initiatives are. They care about that you have anti-human trafficking laws in place, that you have green initiatives. Our parents did not, that wasn't part of their decision making
Yeah.
process, and this younger generation it is, and they want us to be really transparent about what they are. And I see it again personally, but also when I interact with my clients, they want to know what's happening to their waste when it leaves the room, and what are we doing to make sure that our employees are treated fairly, and how many women or minorities do we have in leadership. And it's at first I think we were all overwhelmed because we didn't have that information centralized, and now we do, and it's so easy to speak to it.
Yeah.
And I just really admire younger people for that, for being so passionate about that, and that's kind of what they care about. And I think that's great because that's not what I thought about when I was 21. And so to hear
Yeah.
that emphasis on that, I'm excited for what the future looks like in this industry.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating, and you kind of almost brought it back around to leadership because I did want to get back to the leadership
Yeah.
experience you've been having and you're trying to give to other people within Caesars. But one question I have in terms of your ability to be able to see and experience and react to shifts in the marketplace, how much of that is proactive versus reactive, and how do you listen for that? I'm assuming there's a social science to it, where some people just pick up on it rather than other people who maybe kind of sleepwalk through it. How does that work in terms of the proactive versus reactive to adjust to the market trends?
It's interesting because I feel like hospitality, we are quick to pick up on things. We have to be, right? We have to be
Yeah,
super dynamic
yeah,
and evolve. And I think we learned that with social media. People, pick their hotels now based on what they see on social media. And I think we were not an industry, I don't think, that kind of lagged behind. We tried to always be at the forefront of it. But it's interesting because a lot of times I'll go to a breakout session at a conference and they'll say these are the trends, and I'll be like, I knew it, like because you see it and you
yeah,
see the little bits of it. You might not have put words around it
yeah,
or understood kind of where the trend was coming from, but then when you hear it articulated back to you, you're like, that makes sense. Like we felt it, and then there's just so many thought leaders that they're very quick to put pen to paper and tell us that that's actually what we're experiencing, whether it be the rise of the desire for the luxury hotel, and limited service hotels having to offer more because guests aren't okay with just having a lean cuisine out of a freezer.
yeah.
It's interesting, but I just feel lucky to be in an industry that is really thought, like we have so many thought leaders, and so it doesn't take us a long time to put a word to what we, to your point, are feeling and are seeing.
Yeah, and then using that, for good. And when I say for good, I mean that all encompassing for the good of your business, for the good of your ability to be able to continue to, market and transact
Yeah.
and make sales, of course, but also in terms of education, because as a semi-dumb traveler, I'm just going to go and I want to go somewhere. I loved that. I wrote down earlier, bleisure is the way that I would say it, bleisure, the way that you said it, like I'm learning, of course, like I do on every single podcast, but I don't look for a lot when I travel. I just like to go and try and unwind and get away. But the ability for someone like you to educate me to say, no one does that anymore, or when you're there, you get that experience. However, you can also, sprinkle in a bit of this or do a little
Yeah.
bit of that. These things are opportunities that are open to you and a lot more readily than possibly they might have been at some points in the past. Do you find that you get that opportunity to continually update and educate your clients at the same time?
We do, and it's interesting because I definitely see it is generationally different.
Yeah,
I think like my generation and older, we were the people that initially were just like, get me there, and then get me home. And I do see that changing, and I think there's just been this huge globalization of travel, right? Like when I was growing up, our parents did not. I think there's a little bit of a divide between Canadians and Americans. Canadians are a bit more well traveled than Americans used to be. I
Right.
think I read the statistics, 20 years ago on the number of Canadians that held a passport versus Americans, and it was pretty sad. And I'm sure it's shifted quite a lot. But when I grew up, if you heard about someone's parents traveling extensively through Europe, through Africa, through the Middle East, that was really rare. And it
Yeah.
probably spoke to their parents being very wealthy,
Yes.
very well traveled. Now, people's parents are going all over the world and seeing things and doing things that they probably wouldn't have done before. I meet young people all the time that are just like, I just got back from a 3-week safari. Like that was unheard of 30 years ago. You didn't do those things. Also, there's been such an uptick in like the 3-day trip, right? Like, okay, I've got 3 days. What's the furthest, coolest thing I can go see?
Yeah.
So it's interesting because I think I do have an opportunity to educate some of my older clients, but my younger clients and the younger people I deal with, they're the ones telling me about. Someone just told me yesterday how you can go on a booking travel site. I'm not sure which one, whether it be a Travelocity or a Priceline. But she goes, okay, so there's this like hack where they list the deals. And she goes, but if you don't put a date, she goes, it'll just throw back at you. Hey, if you can travel next week, you can go to Ireland for $600 round trip, includes the hotel. She's like, and it had a name, and excuse me for not remembering it, but she goes, my friends and I, that's all we do. We let it tell us where we're going to go. And that
Wow.
was something I had never heard of, never thought of.
Yeah.
Might not be realistic for me in my life because I don't get to travel on a week's notice anymore.
Yeah.
But it was just so interesting because I'm like, this is what's next. And this is what young people want. And so I love to educate, but I love probably even more myself to be educated.
Yeah, I love it. There's always opportunities to be the teacher and be the student at the same time
Yeah.
in any circumstance. So back to Caesars, I know that when we were chatting prior to recording, you were so enthused about your experience in terms of your growth, in terms of the support that you were given, and when it got to family time, for Jennifer and family, and you were a bit unsure about how that was going to be received with the organization. It was received exceptionally well, which made you fall in love with the organization even more. But tell me about the leadership that you've experienced within the Caesars group and how that's helped you grow as a person.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much been like one of the most critical things and my passion for the company and my growth with the company. And it's interesting because I started my family in my 40s, which is, still considered later in life. And I see some things about that have made it 10 times easier, some things, parts of it that have made it harder. But the one thing that has made my transition into motherhood the easiest has been the culture at Caesars.
Yeah.
And we always said we were family oriented, and I always touted that, but I don't think I knew what that meant until I had children, because anyone with children will tell you, I mean, nothing shakes your world and your life up quite like that.
Yeah.
I knew that when I was a leader 5 years ago, it was important to me that people attended events with their kids and did things with their kids and prioritized their kids. But till you have kids, you just don't understand it.
Yes.
And I kind of tried to really drill down into the number one thing that our leadership has done to make that so ingrained in our culture.
Mm.
And our vice president, her name is Kelly Smith. She's a mom. She has a son in college and a son in high school. And she did the most subtle thing, but it yet was one of the most impactful things. And so before she was our vice president, she was my director, my boss. And whenever she had something for her kids, she would tell us that that's what she had. She would not say, I'm not available this afternoon. She would not say, I have a commitment from 1 to 2. She would say, my son has a hockey game. My son has a volleyball game. I have to be at this event. I will not miss this. I have to leave IMAX a day early because I have a commitment with my family. And it was never she never tried to hide it. And I think I had bosses before who were super supportive, super family oriented, but they never put a name to their commitment. And
Right.
she always did. And so that taught me that I could say to her, my son is going to dress as a cow and parade around his daycare, and I am going to go and spend an hour watching him.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because it wasn't this huge thing. It was this
Yeah.
small thing. But when you hear something day after day after day, it starts to become ingrained in you. And that's
Yeah.
why I knew that I could, be the mom that I wanted to be. It was interesting though, because I still was a little nervous to tell work, when I got pregnant and how was that going to affect and my time off and everything.
Yeah.
And when I actually shared that with her, she's like, that makes me sad. She's like, well, I want to continue to create a culture where no one ever feels that way. And I said, you do. And I said, it's just unfortunate that when I started in my career, that was still looked down upon. You know, people said, oh, the mommy route, and you know, they're going to do this and they're not going to come back to work. And I said, no matter how far removed you are from that, it still kind of is in the back of your head. And I go, but there is nothing more that our company could do. I mean, it's family first all the way. And so that's been just so impactful on me because it allows me to have it all. Which I compare myself to my friends and some of their jobs, and I feel like Caesar's really goes above and beyond when it comes to the culture they've created and the understanding. And it's not just parents. It's we have tons of leaders that don't have children, and they're on board with it. And I
Yeah.
just feel really fortunate because I don't ever think I could find something or a company that gives me the exact job I want. I
Yeah.
work with incredible people and I just have so much support. So I feel very lucky.
That's fantastic. And I love what you said earlier there in terms of putting a name to it. You know, other people might mask it up as I am unavailable or I have a commitment elsewhere. And it made me think of when my son Leo was younger, what I noticed a lot in life in general, but certainly in the workplace, was people would talk about their kids and they would literally say, my kids this, my kids that, my kids that. And I would always be, what, what's your kids' names? Unless, is that their name? I'm sure it's not, but maybe it is. And so I made a point from very early on, as in like when Leo was just born, to continually say Leo, to create a connection, to personalise the experience, because from the moment that his mum was pregnant and up to this point, he's the most important thing. He's the only point of anything that I do is to make sure that he has a role model, that he has, you know, taught in a certain way, that he has an experience as a kid that I would like him to have, and he knows ethics and hard work and endeavour and such. But I was so surprised, even today, the amount of times, and maybe look out for this when you're in the
It's
workplace or you're talking
interesting.
to
I
clients.
think you make a really good point.
It was just, yeah, there was very little time. I was teaching a class this morning or doing a guest lecture at a class, and within 3 minutes of me introducing myself, they know my son's name and they know about Glasgow Rangers Football Club, and it's just that personalisation to try and create
I like
that
that.
that connection. Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of then, you know, becoming a mum somewhat later in life, as you'd mentioned a little bit earlier there, you know, and you're continuing through your career, you're traveling, you're still doing, you know, the active work that you're doing and empowering the people on your team and the clients and such. How has that changed your approach to work-life balance? I know you alluded to it a little bit there in terms of, you know, the cow outfit and running around the daycare and such. But in general terms, how has that impacted your life in terms of the work-life experience?
It's interesting because I feel there's there's two moms in me. There's the one that is like I want to spend every second with my son and be like around him 24/7. But then I start to realize though that I want I more like the idea of my son seeing me as a role model in my career. I want him to step away because at first I kind of thought like, would I want to be a stay-at-home mom? And I have so much respect for stay-at-home moms. I don't know how they do it because toddlers and children are they're tiring and exhausting after a
Yeah,
full day. But I
yeah,
kind of toyed with that idea, like, would that ever be a path for me? And I realized the path for me was to be really successful in my career so that when my son looks back, he's going to say, my mom worked so hard. And I just listened to this woman win an award and her daughter gave it to her, and her daughter was in her 20s.
oh wow,
And she just, it was really touching. And she just said, you know, my mom would, sometimes I'd wake up in the morning and my dad would be there and my mom would have made breakfast. And then I would call my mom and I wouldn't realize she was like halfway to Milan already that morning. And she's like,
yeah,
it was just so impactful. And she goes, but then my mom was always back for that really important volleyball game. And I realized that that was the path that I would wanted to take. I want Wilder in 15 years to be like, yeah, my mom flew around the world and still made it to my cow parade, you know? And I think that's where I settled with what was important to me and how I kind of wanted to balance it all out. And I used to do a lot of leisure. I had to cut back on that because
yeah,
you know, I can't spend every other weekend in Europe anymore, but I have a really supportive partner who also is in this industry. He travels extensively throughout the Asia Pacific region. I travel pretty extensively throughout Europe. And we've both been just super supportive of each other. And I do enforce a rule that at least once a year you have to spend the weekend in, for me, Europe, and for him somewhere in the APAC, because I say we do not fly this far to not enjoy something.
Yeah.
Before I used to tag that weekend on every time, and now I
Yeah.
do it once a year, and it's something that we look forward to. But my son will talk to you about how his mom goes to Barcelona. I've been to Barcelona 3 times this year, so it's a hot topic in our house. But I just think that's pretty cool that my 2.5-year-old knows about that and talks about it. And for his dad, it's Singapore, because his dad was in Singapore a couple times this year. And so he talks about how daddy was in Singapore. And I like that. I think it's cool. And I like how much he's already been exposed to. And I'm proud of that. And I think it's going to really make him a really interesting and well-rounded individual. And I think that the times that we're apart, whether it be 4 or 5 days, I think I make up for it on the front and back end. And he also, I make sure to educate him on where I go and what I do. And that's obviously going to be even better as he gets older, because I can really dive in. Now it's more like, here's this toy that I got you in Spain. And, when his dad went to Dubai, brought him back stuffed camels, and we talk about it, but it's neat. And I just already like hearing my son talk about those kind of things, because he's kind of becoming like a little global citizen, even though he's, not even 3 yet. So, I think to any new parent, I would say that you're going to have this period where you're trying to figure out who your identity is as a mother or father. And there's no wrong answer to that. It's just about what's the biggest priority to us. And I kind of stumbled my way through it for a little bit. And then all of a sudden I'm like, this is it. This feels good. And so I'm really happy with where I'm at in that place.
I really love that, because it really just oozes of intention. This is the intention, this is the intentional circumstance and situation and atmosphere I want to create for this family unit. And once you know what that intention is, this is what I would love my son to say about our lives as we grew up together. Then once you have that kind of North Star, that intentional framework, then you have an ability to know whether you're leaning into that or whether you're compromising that at times, and it gives you the best opportunity for extreme presence in a moment to know exactly who you are and what you're doing. So in terms of then back to the hospitality industry, we talked about the biggest changes you've seen in the 20 years that you've been there. What would you say the biggest opportunities and challenges are for the next 5, 10, 20 years in the industry?
Yeah, so I think a big thing too is that I'm really hearing a lot about, and this kind of aligns with the initiatives that are important to people, but people are really concerned about health and wellness and also mental health.
Yeah.
And I think in our industry, typically we were used to working crazy hours, and it was, especially in events, and especially the people that operate our events, they might get to work at 5 a.m. or work until 3 a.m. And sometimes maybe their mental health or their wellness could suffer because of that. And so that is the new topic that I'm hearing about. It on a very introductory level, it's what are the wellness experiences for me at your hotel? But then as we really dig in, it's how are you going to support my mental health in this field that we work in? I mean, I think meeting planning is like the number 2 most stressful job in the world.
Right.
And so I think it's going to be, how do we balance the two? How do we protect people's mental health and support them while we have and work in such a demanding industry? I mean, meetings and events are 3-4 days long. They're planned for years at a time. So there is a level of perfection that we desire and require for them. And so when I look at that, it is about what's that future balance going to be moving forward. I even just met with a man at IMEX who they're kind of trying to create like a global standard on like mental health in the industry, which I'm interested to kind of follow that path and see where that goes. So I think it's going to be about balancing that. I think it's going to be about continuing to create the bespoke experiences. I think it's also another thing I'm seeing a lot in the headlines too, though, is how do we handle this onslaught of tourism? So everyone wants to travel now, kind of to the point that we made about the globalization of travel. But how do we balance that with protecting these very niche areas that maybe did not have a ton of tourism previously? Again, this is not as impactful in Vegas, but I'm really into national parks. I like to hike and travel to them. And I see every year trails getting closed down because they're becoming overrun with tourists. You can't do the hike anymore, or maybe they're only letting 100 people a year do the hike. So
Yeah.
I think it's going to be about balancing that. But then I think a lot of people have read there's been a real backlash against tourism in places like Spain and Barcelona, and Venice, because they're seeing the impacts of it. And so how do we protect these cultural places or these natural places that were not built for this?
Yeah.
Vegas was built for it. We're ready,
Yeah.
come. But how do we do it in these more, these smaller historical markets? And, you see people in Spain and they say, well, our rents have gone up doubled because everyone's doing an Airbnb now. And
Mhm.
now, what we made was more than enough to live comfortably. And now, because they perceive it as this onslaught of tourism, has taken so much from them. So I really think it's going to, because we're just going to travel more and more and more. It's just becoming more and more accessible every single day. So I think it's really about respecting the cultures and the places that we're going,
Mhm.
and the people that already live there and that are the reason that we're traveling there. So I think that's going to be, to me, a huge part of it. And also, I would say just the creation of everything. The buzzword now is lifestyle brands, and
Mhm.
so I think it's going to be about these hotels, maybe the old guard, Marriott's, the Hiltons, the Caesars of the world. How do we become a lifestyle brand?
Yeah.
And how do we reflect the lifestyles of our travelers? So I think that's going to be the big change, because it's super easy to be reflective of your traveler when you have 100 guest rooms. But how
Yeah.
do you do it when you have 4,000 or 5,000?
Yeah.
How do you give that personal touch? How do you integrate the local culture? And so I think that's where we're going to see the biggest challenges, but also the biggest opportunities.
Yeah. It's so multi-layered there, because we started, or you started talking about the individual person, the individual's wellness, and then it became a societal wellness conversation to say
Yeah.
if we are entering new literal societies, global spaces, physical spaces, and that, how do we do that with grace? How do we do that, with intention? How do we do that with a genuine wellness lens on? It becomes a lot more complicated than just saying it's really nice there. The weather is very consistent for this type and style of vacation, holiday, that kind of thing going forward. There's a lot to that. And one of the things I was thinking about, Jennifer, earlier when you were talking about wellness, and I've been talking about this recently, and I think I'm going to, in fact, I'm going to write something about this, or pod something about this. Distractions. A lot of times I think people's experiences, whether it's at an event, whether it's at a stay, whether it's at in a business meeting, or trying to get to a business meeting, or trying to get a client meeting, or some sort of interaction with someone, there's a lot of distractions taking you away from the actual experience in and of itself that you're trying to get. And I think when you have someone, for example, walking up to the hotel counter, to check in after having a nightmare of a travel day that the check-in person has no idea of any context around. How do you center ground that person as quickly as you possibly can to say everything's okay? You're here. We take care of the distractions. You don't have to.
Yeah.
If anything happens, you press 0 on that phone. Someone will be with you within 3 to 5 minutes. Like, I'm just making it up now, of course, but just in terms of the material distractions that would take away from the experience that is the overall intention for them to be there in the first place. I think there's something to that, and it's certainly not a buzzword or a buzz term. But what I'm noticing more and more about people, especially people who are having a less than desirable experience, it's not about the experience in and of itself. It's about the periphery and the things that have happened in and around that have distracted the thought pattern, have distracted the physical well-being, their mental well-being, their potential enjoyment, and overall experience and growth opportunity that they've got. So distractions is something maybe you and I will chat about at some point in the
Yeah.
future, and figure that part out. So this has been a fantastic conversation. I've learned a lot. I've written down a whole bunch of notes here as well that I'd love to follow up with you afterwards. Before I let you go, Jennifer, where could people find a little bit more about you?
Well, we're talking about LinkedIn. I do have a LinkedIn. I'll definitely share that with you. I don't actually know what my handle is or how you would find your way to that. I'll get that information over to you, but I would love, love, love to connect with people. I'm also on Instagram if you want to see all those cow photos of my son.
I love it. I love it.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll get those notes popped in the show
Perfect.
notes for this particular podcast. Jennifer, great to see you again. Thank you
Yeah.
very, very much for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Gary. I really appreciate it.
Hello again. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, and I do hope that you found it valuable and gained some insights. I do have an ask for you. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would connect with me on my socials, and that's at LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search for my name and do whatever it is you need to do there to follow me and stay updated with all the latest content, tips, and discussions. And for any more resources that you're looking for, feel free to visit my website, garygillen.com. And while you're there, you can book a free, no obligation 30-minute coaching call directly with me through the site. Whether you're looking to enhance your performance or tackle a new challenge, I'm absolutely here to help you succeed, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much again, and until next time, keep pushing towards your goals and getting better each and every day, my friend.